Overdrive? Distortion? Fuzz? What's even the difference?
Welcome to another thrilling day here at No Fear Gear, and today we're answering the age-old question, what's the meaning of life? What's the difference between a hot dog and a sandwich? No, we're talking about the difference between distortion, overdrive, and fuzz. What is the difference between overdrive, distortion, fuzz? Everyone has a different opinion on what that is, and everyone has their own point of view, and I think we're both gonna try to figure out, we'll find some middle ground in our opinion on what makes them different, what makes them unique, and how we would apply them. So that way you can think about what guitar player am I, what sound am I going for, and maybe we can help you figure out which of these three might be that secret magic potion. Yeah. Take your tone.
Those are the three main categories of dirt pedals. Like everything lands into those three categories, even like a boost. And there's no rules, by the way. Like you can find your own way to use anything to do all sorts of stuff. But we're just gonna show you what we think is kind of like the general consensus as far as like, you know, broad definitions of how these things work.
100%.
Feel free to disagree with us.
I think we'll go from like polite to crazy. So like maybe we'll go like overdrive, which is the Tube Screamer Mini. A lot of people consider that an overdrive.
Of course.
Right? Classic one. The DoD Gunslinger MOSFET Distortion has the word distortion in it. So obviously it has to be distortion. And then we have the Jam Pedals Fuzz Phrase LTD, has the word fuzz in it. So obviously.
And it's a little fuzzy. It's like it's just wrapped in suede. So it's got to be a fuzz.
Suede-ish.
I think it would be interesting to like, just off the top of our heads.
Yeah.
Tube Screamer.
Yes.
Blues, classic rock.
Yes.
Distortion. Punk, metal.
Punk metal, yeah.
Fuzz, psychedelic, classic rock.
Psychedelic.
Like you could put it into genres that would you commonly associate the effects with. You know, there's a lot of different ways to classify these things and kind of compartmentalize them.
Yeah. We could think of it all, maybe another way to think about it is like going from clean to mean, like an overdrive,
Clean
a little bit more,
yes.
a little bit more tame. It's a little bit more organic. You're hearing more of the natural character of your instrument.
Yeah.
Distortion starts taking it over. It's still tight and defined, still has a lot of things. And then once you get to the fuzz, we were talking about what's different. I like to think of it as like a clean to mean thing, right?
Okay.
Right? This is my guitar, this is my clean tone. Listen to this. We're gonna turn on an overdrive and you're gonna see it's just kind of like my tone to like that next level, right? So it's still quite clean.
You still get the character of the guitar through there, which I think is a easy way to classify an overdrive. Can you still hear the guitar through it? It's not being completely overtaken by the distortion effect.
The nuances, you could hear, it sounds like a Jazzmaster. And then when you play like a humbucker guitar, you could still. Take that off. You can hear there's a big difference. You can really hear the nuances of our instrument. Then we'll step it up to distortion. Distortion is definitely adding a lot more saturation, a lot more character.
Right. It's higher gain, it's thicker, tighter gain, it's heavier.
Aggressive. Well, let's hear it with that. It's really that gain, the clipping character that's really beginning to take over our sound. You know what I mean?
It almost becomes a sound effect at a certain point because it's just a block of square wave distortion.
Nasty beautifulness. But there's still a lot of articulation, still a lot of touch in it. Like it's really following my fingers. When I play it, it's a very immediate attack. Same thing with an overdrive. But this one it's still tight, but it just has more gruffness. I guess the first thing we'll talk about is overdrive. We'll start clean to mean.
Okay.
Let's turn on the overdrive. This is my guitar without the overdrive. It's kind of just a meaner version of it. You still hear some of the character in my amp. It's very much boosted up, and it does overdrive. It kind of grits up.
Oh, it definitely overdrives.
Yeah, it overdrives.
It doesn't underdrive.
You could think about it in terms of dynamics. Oh, a lot of overdrives, like, I don't know, like an OCD or something.
Sure.
Yeah, very touch sensitive. It cleans up. This doesn't clean up. It's always the same.
Right.
Right? No matter where I am, it's always the same place. Some people think of it as a dynamic thing, but then that wouldn't fit the mold of what people think overdrive. I actually think of it this way. What is it doing to my signal?
Sure.
So in my opinion, an overdrive is a soft clipper, and then a distortion is a hard clipper, which means, like, say we have our little wave sign thing. Are you gonna do? Is it gonna be a
Yeah, I
graphic?
can see the graphic that they're definitely gonna work on.
So what
making
happens
for
is when
us.
you get the overdrive, I feel like the waveform is still like this nice organic thing. Maybe it's a little bit more pushed. It's a little bit more on the edges of the nastiness. So we're kind of getting a little bit of a kind of a clip of some sort, but it's what it's doing is just more magnifying this round sine wavy looking thing.
An overdrive, like, to use clipping as a metaphor here, we're gonna do a haircut metaphor.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So an overdrive is just cleaning up around the ears, back of the neck sort of thing, where like a fuzz is just like flat top, fades on the sides, and a distortion is more like you're gonna get like completely reshaped, like a tight mohawk or something like that.
I feel like when you're pushing, like say you're pushing a waveform, what happens is there's a point where you can't get louder.
Right.
So that little nice round circle is gonna get cut off because you can't get louder.
Right.
And that's kind of the type of clipping. So I feel like you can use an overdrive is because it doesn't clip. What it does is it pushes your amp to clip, and therefore you're creating distortion with overdrive. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Whereas, say something
There's
like
definitely clipping happening in a tube screamer.
where with
I disagree with what
well, no.
you just said.
Think about it's like the way the actual quality. If you actually look at it in a scope, you know, when you're pushing it, it's not this flat.
Sure,
thing.
it's not a square wave.
There's harmonics that you're getting. You're adding harmonics. You're adding sustain, but it's not necessarily creating a form of distortion, right? But where if I push this into a cranked amp, it's going to push it to the boundaries of that, and then it's going to naturally flat off the top and bottom and create distortion. Does that make sense?
I think you're overcomplicating.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Like, listen, we have distortion here.
Why use many words when few do trick?
All right. I almost kind of feel like we could use an overdrive to push things to get distorted. Whereas
Of course.
a distortion just sounds distorted on its own. Does that make sense? Like, this is like really. A lot more compressed. It's a lot more squared off on the top. It's more saturated. It's more harmonic, and it's very. Whereas this one, it's a little bit more polite. It's cleaner.
You got more of the guitar's signal in there.
I could actually hear more of the character of my guitar coming
course.
through because it's not just getting lost in the swamp of saturation. And clipping. Whereas this is. You know, that has its own amount of gain. You could put that in a clean amp, you know, and it's going to sound really, really this. Whereas if I put this in a clean amp, it's going to sound different than in a dirty amp.
Of course.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to go to the fuzz.
Here we go.
Okay, so a fuzz has, whereas you kind of hear that, you know, you could really hear the difference between our guitars here, and then here you're really seeing the effect kind of start to take control. The fuzz, I really feel like it's really the star of the show here. It changes your attack, it changes the characteristics of guitar. It's very, very crazy. We should give that a go. They're bringing it to sound pretty similar, aren't they? Again, do the same thing. Right?
Yeah, it's almost like the guitar doesn't matter.
And now do the overdrive. Here's the overdrive. very, very different. We could actually start to hear the differences now, right?
Mm-hmm.
My tack is very, very different. But yeah, the fuzz kind of takes over the whole world. One thing I like to
Also,
think.
it's like a fuzz is just such a blunt object. It's just like the distortion is like, it's heavy, it's thick, it's saturated, but it's still, your signal's intact. Like a fuzz just destroys your signal. It's an act of violence against your guitar.
I think like distortion is very pretty, right? Like it's like the attack is tight. It has a lot of sustain, and it just goes on forever. It's almost like it makes you like feel like you're a better guitar player than you are. Right. I find that fuzzes, in general, I find that when you play, there's almost like a little bit of a delay. Like there's a sag to it. Like an old tube amp when you're cranking an old tube, it kind of fights, so it doesn't react to you as quickly. And then sometimes they can have very quick, the note will just die quickly. This is like kind of like a Fender, or not Fender, like a Marshall Plexi, like with the volume on like 5. And this is like a Marshall Plexi cranked up, and this is a Marshall Plexi with a broken speaker cap.
It's a Marshall Plexi that's tumbling down a mountain.
Tumbling down a mountain. And I think that's when people go like, oh, this pedal is kind of like a Proco Rat you get a lot, right? Like, oh, is it a distortion or is it a fuzz? The way I interpret it is like, it's because as you turn up a Proco Rat, you know, it gets looser and flabbier, and all of a sudden, and it gets more Velcro-y. So by Velcro-y, I mean like the sustain's not quite there. It's more chippy and choppy, and really kind of like.
Well, it's something I think about when I'm categorizing effects, even within their own genres of effects. Something I pay attention to is the tightness of the grit.
Yeah.
Like some overdrives have really loose grit. A tube screamer has really tight, like fizzy grit. Like that grit is close together and it's compact, which is a great thing to add into an amp that's got loose grit, and you're filling it out that way and stacking grit. A distortion typically has really tight grit too, and it's really compact and full. Where I like a fuzz that's just got loose, random, spiky, artifacty grit. Like it's almost like a static where you don't know when there's going to be little pops and exciting moments. It's like popping a
You're not as in control of your sound.
You're not as in control. It's not predictable.
I also find with these, the harmonics are kind of in tune. They match the harmonics of guitar. Sometimes I feel like fuzzes, they're almost like ring modulators. They'll add other harmonics that are maybe not quite in line with what you're playing, especially when you're playing with bias. And
there's more surprises.
I like fuzzes kind of. I like it. They're kind of cool.
But a lot of reason why you would pick one over another, especially within the genres. You would pick maybe a tube screamer over a blues driver, over an OCD, over a DOD 250, not just on the gain character, not just on the gain range or the dynamics, because they all have differences in those ranges, but in what it does to the EQ. Like a tube screamer famously has a mid hump. There's other overdrives that are more mid scooped, or they're pushing treble, or they're pushing bass, and building your rig around what these different products do EQ wise is a really smart way to go too. I'm gonna point at a pedal, and I'm going to tell you to play a genre with it.
Okay.
This is how I classify these different types of dirt pedal in my mind.
Okay.
Overdrive, tube screamer, I'm thinking blues, I'm thinking classic rock.
There you go. See, you could play a little nice and polite with the overdrive too,
Now I want you to go full blown like 90s pop punk with the distortion. Now give me psychedelic.
Psychedelic? You have to recommend 3 fuzzes, 3 overdrives, and 3 distortions to our audience, what would be a good starting point?
Everyone who is shopping for pedals and they want to try classic pedals, everyone should try, every guitarist should try like a fuzz face, a big muff,
Big muff is good.
and then some sort of octave fuzz.
Or like the octave fuzz.
Like a Fox tone machine or an Octavia or something like that. Overdrives, everyone should try a Tube Screamer. Everyone should try like a Blues Breaker.
Blues Breaker.
Everyone should try like a DoD 250. Those are different styles of overdrive. And then for distortion, I mean, we've all done it. Most guitarists have done it. You got to get yourself a DS1.
You like the DS1? Really?
You have
Okay.
to just know what it's like. You have to know what people are talking about when they talk about a DS1. And if you don't get a DS1, get a Metal Zone.
Oh, classic.
It's one or the other.
Wow. One pedal. You could have one gain box.
Only
So
one.
Just to pitch out, what would be the one gain box you would recommend for any starting guitar player?
So a dirt pedal that everyone should try.
Well, no, just have.
Everyone should just have
I want to
one.
buy something. I want to get into the world of
And it
just,
can cover the range of light gain to heavy gain to kind of edge of fuzzy and things like that.
You have like a little Princeton, little clean amp. You just want something to take you to all the little different directions
It's
you need.
got to be a Rat.
It has to be Rat.
It has to be a Rat.
You're
Like,
agreed, yeah.
It's a weirdly specific sounding pedal, but it covers a really interesting wide range of gain styles.
Yeah.
Like there's people who play them very clean. Like it's a secret weapon for like rockabilly players with the gain all the way down. They use it for like a tone shaping thing, all the way to kind of just mid crunchy overdrive stuff, and all the way to full blown distortion, and even on the edge of like there's a bit of like a Velcro raspy fuzzy edge to them, turned all the way up.
It's one of the great-
Rats is a classic for
and
a
they're
reason.
cheap. They're
Yeah.
cheap, and they really are.
There's a billion
one of-
versions of them too.
I can't get enough of that. It's my favorite pedal. I very rarely have a board without something radish.
But also incredibly specific sound with that very unique tone stack. It has this filter to it that
That
is
does a really
unmistakable.
cool thing. Yep. And the quality of the sound changes as you go up. It gets brighter and brighter.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But that being said, this is a wonderful experimentation. If you have anything to add, anything on your views that you think might be more overdriven, something more fuzzy that we haven't, mentioned, please write in the comment section below. That being said, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.